Hey, Boggy.
Huh?
You sure it was a good idea for us to be having that, fire sword?
The boss says we guards it, so we guards it.
I mean, Boggy, are you sure it's a good idea for us to be the ones guarding it?
It's what the bosses wants. Why?
It's just, I have a feeling that something bad's about to happen.
Don't be ridiculous. We're a couple of low-level goblins guarding a magical treasure in the middle of an easily navigated cave. What could possibly...
Ha ha! Cower in fear, goblin fiends, for today you will meet your doom at the hands of Rock Pyratrix the Clanless.
And, me, Bedlam the Chained.
What do you want?
We are here to recover the flame-tongued sword that you stole from the king's treasury, and beat you mercilessly before stripping you of any treasure you might have on you.
That's barbaric!
It's business! And speaking of business, let's get down to...
Hold it right there, foul thieves! Those who stole the flame tongue shall face justice at the hands of Lightning Dancer and partner Grabbleshanks.
We shank some from afar, yes.
And now we shall be...
Oh, come on!
What?
What are you guys doing here? This is our dungeon, not yours, so clear out!
Yeah, and I mean, really? A kitty cat? And you, aren't you a goblin too?
If they's on me ledger, they's had it coming.
Either way, it's clear your dungeon master was too dull to do anything but buy the same one-shot adventure as ours.
Ha! Your dungeon master pirated that copy off the internet.
Yeah? Well, we'll see who laughs last, rat breath.
Yes, we will.
Boggy, I'm scared.
Yes, here it is, everybody. I said I was going to do a video about Dungeons & Dragons Onslaught, and here it is. So, Dungeons & Dragons Onslaught isn't technically like a new expansion for Dungeons & Dragons, but it's more like competitive Dungeons & Dragons. So, what happens is, with Dungeons & Dragons Onslaught, it's like if two adventuring parties went into the same dungeon and they were then fighting over the chance to be the ones to actually clear the dungeon. So it is two sides, they are opposed and they are technically fighting one another, but all of the dungeons, hazards, and monsters and quests or stuff are still sitting there. So rather than being just a straight up like team versus team, like skirmish combat game, you actually have a quest to complete as well, and it is a game based on victory points. I mean, you can win by defeating all of your opponent's characters, but the real money is in trying to clear the challenge while your opponents are attempting to do the same. So, I was handed this preview kit, and like I said in the video about PAX Unplugged, where I got this kit, I said I was going to take a look at it, and what this does is it has sort of a miniature campaign in here. It doesn't have like a full swath of characters or a full swath of enemies like that, but it does have its own thing, and it's actually kind of a pretty interesting combination of rules. Now, it does use a lot of terminology from Dungeons & Dragons, so familiarity with base 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons will help a lot with this. If, for example, I say, when their turn comes up in initiative, a character can make one move action, one standard action, and one bonus action with all rolls made at advantage. If you understood that sentence, you're in a good place to understand how it goes. It uses a lot of terminology. You actually do make dice rolls to launch your attacks using a 20-sided die. The character movement and the measurement of range is all basically the same. But it actually has a lot of things in common with another game. So you might notice that this game is made by WizKids. Now, WizKids is the company that is the official makers of the Dungeons & Dragons miniatures. These are some unpainted ones I also got at PAX Unplugged. They had so many of these miniatures. They were like, please take them. You know, Sunday, if you're fishing for freebies, Sunday is the day to go and get them. The last day of the convention is the day to go and grab your freebies, because on the first day they're hesitant, they don't know how it'll pace out, but by Sunday they're like, please, we don't want to pack this up and take this again. But moving on, yes, they do the Dungeons & Dragons miniatures, which is what they're also using in here, although they come with clear bases, although I don't know if this one comes with clear they come with the little black bases. I see them now. They're like little black bases here. I have a couple others that have clear bases. The ones in here use the clear bases, but the other thing that Onslaught actually uses that it has in common with is HeroClix. Now, HeroClix is probably the game that WizKids is most known for. It's a game that uses superheroes, although they've also crossed over with like movies. I know there was like a Yu-Gi-Oh set, but what happens with HeroClix is that the characters are sitting on a dial, and what happens is when those characters take damage, the dial can click ahead in different spaces, and what this can do is this can cause, like you see right there, it can cause their stats and their abilities to change. Like in Superman's case, when he's at the start, he has good defense, he has an attack of 11, but then those drop down to 10, but then his attack jumps back up to 11 again. So the idea is that as the characters move down their dial, their stats and abilities change until eventually they hit 0 and get knocked out. Now, Superman's an expensive character, so he has a lot of spots, a lot of really good abilities, but Onslaught also makes use of these sorts of dials. Welcome back, folks. I know my voice was kind of a mess for a bit there, but you'll see what I mean when I take a look inside. So inside of this box, we of course have the Onslaught Preview Rulebook. I will go over the rules of how to play once we actually get into it. And underneath that, we have our preview set. So we have our miniatures here. We have a set of 6 of them. We have 4 player characters and 2 goblin guards, although I admit it's kind of hard to tell since one of our player characters is themselves a goblin. So let's get a nice look at what we got here. So we have a couple of characters here. This one with the bow and arrow, I believe, is our player character goblin, because these other 2 are basically the same miniature. One has a sword, one has a mace, but this one has the bow and arrow, which ties in with what we got. We also have a tabaxi, looks like a fighter or a rogue. They're dual wielding, so they might be like a rogue or a ranger. We have our I believe this is a Dragonborn sorcerer here, and they're all on the clear bases. And a tiefling warlock, along with our pair of goblins. We have a goblin ranger. Oh, okay, so this is our ranger. Maybe this is our... I think this might be a fighter, because they're wearing the heavy armor. So it seems like it's 4 characters against 2 goblins. That seems like a pretty cruel matchup there. So we also have a very small sort of fold-out board here. And this is actually like a trimmed-down version of the board I played with at PAX Unplugged. I remember this throne here. Like I said, I went against there was one I played at PAX Unplugged where I played against an Etten, and that Etten was sitting on the throne. It sits on the throne and throws rocks at you for the first half of the fight, but then it gets mad and it starts chasing you around all over the place. It's great. So what happens is we have these kind of bright corners here. And what these are is these are impassable objects. So there are positions on the map where characters cannot move, stand, or shoot through. And in this case, they go all the way clean to the edge of the board. So it makes it for some interesting movement challenges. Also in here, we have a nice sheet of tokens. This sheet of tokens is it's our treasure tokens. It's our treasure chest tokens. What happens is when you get to a treasure chest, you like stuff the treasure tokens into a bag. You can see they're two-sided here. They like go into like a bag or a cup, and you like shake them around, and you that's how you determine which one you get. You draw them out at random. We have tokens for abilities, although these are from 5th edition, although they're also from 4th edition as well. They're things like Fighter's Challenge and Hunter's Mark and Curse. These are like the bonus action abilities you get in the game that enable you to do things. And of course we have the wound tokens, which are necessary for the goblin guards, but not for the characters, because our characters are measured with this. So here is our character card. So this is our character card with a set of dials. As you can see, it has the dial, just like with HeroClix, like I was showing off before. As you rotate through the dial, so the one on the far right here is their current hit points, And as you tick down the dial, we'll get to a point where once they get half hit points, their abilities will change. Like this one loses a point of armor class. There are some that have other effects such as like gaining armor class or like losing or gaining speed. But yeah, their abilities change throughout the battle. But you can see that that's not a lot of hit points. 10 hit points is like the number of hit points you have at like level 1, maybe level 2 if you're playing as a weak class. So the damage that these characters deal are also kind of hero clicks level. So what happens is you still roll to make your hit. Like this one says enemy at close range +5 to hit, or enemy at range 2 to 6 +5 to hit. And then it does a set 2 damage or 2 damage. And this can be to a target, it can be to an entity used by another player, but the damage is pretty low. Generally, it's 1 damage for like a basic attack, like a character who specializes in one way, specializes in melee, trying to use a ranged. 2 is for what I'm going to call proficient attacks. That's like attacks that these guys are pretty good at, and 3 are for like major attacks. Like I think one of them in here has a fireball attack. Yeah, here he is. Rox Pyratrix the Clanless has a fireball attack that can deal... he has a Burning Hands attack that deals 3 damage at close range. So that's another thing to talk about, is there's more than one dial. We have dials here, which are for experience points, as in once you gain enough of these experience points by doing what the thing declares. When you hit this, you gain a level, which is actually done by drawing one of the corresponding character cards from here. You go back to level 1 at the start of every tournament, so it's not like the levels stay accumulated. And then down here we have cooldown abilities. Now these all use the same dial, but they don't all have the same cooldown. Let me see if I can find one with a different cooldown. Yeah, here is one with a cooldown of 3 or a cooldown of 5. So what happens is, if there's a check mark here, you say, I'm going to use this ability, and then you spin it to where it says to set the cooldown meter, and it has to go that number of turns before you set it again. Like, this one would be set to 5, and this one I would twist it all the way to 3, and at the start of each turn, these all advance 1, and once it gets back to the check, you can use it again. It's the same with the reactions. Each one has a reaction that triggers based on an enemy's action or an opponent's action. You can activate the special ability, which does some good stuff. Everybody has some really cool stuff, like Rox Pyratrix. He wants to play aggressively because he actually gets points back whenever he takes damage. So everybody has their cantrips, their basic abilities. There are also bonuses for getting a critical hit, that is getting a natural 20 on one of the 20-sided dice. So a lot of fun here. And then we have the initiative cards. Now, what these initiative cards do is these tell you who goes first and in what order. Normally in Dungeons & Dragons, you do an initiative roll and start with the player who has the highest initiative. In this case, you count forward. So 1 goes first, then 2, then 3, then 4. And what happens is, one player, after winning the coin toss, they take the 1, then they shuffle up the 2, 3, and 4, and the other player draws randomly 2 cards from this initiative stack. So one player gets the 1, then they get whatever card is left after the other player randomly draws 2. Then at the next turn, the opponent gets to do that, so they get the 1 automatically, and they deal the hand here. So initiative is always going back and forth, and in larger games, initiative can go as high as 10. This is Monster Initiative. It says 10.5. I'll get into it to a second. And what happens is you actually split the cards into a pair of bunches. Like, the person who gets 1 also gets cards 2, 3, 4, and 5, and the other player gets cards 6 through 10, and both players each take 2 from each other to make sure that the initiative is all nice and mixed up. So planning your initiative to interpret your opponent's moves, and these actually get set down in secret, except for number 1. You like slip it underneath your character card, and then when their initiative comes up, you flip it face up, and you're like, boom, there we go. The monsters actually have initiatives of 0.5. So what happens is they activate in between character turns. Like, in the larger event that I played at the demo, the monsters acted on like 1.5 and 5.5, and here it's 10.5, which is at the end of the round. The goblins over here activate. And we also have the Goblin Guard card. So the monsters are represented by this card, and monsters are a bit different. You can see they have a health score down here. So these have 4. They have to take 4 damage before they die. So basically 2 hits per. But what they do is they move towards the closest enemy, or in the case of a tie, they move towards the player whose initiative went last. So basically, whichever player had initiative 4, they will move towards that characters, and they don't do any attack rolls. They check the range and they hit and do their damage automatically. So they are hazards that are incredibly difficult to fudge. The Etten boss in the larger campaign actually did require a roll, but that was to determine whether he did 1 damage or 3 with his attack. So, and of course we have the level up cards here. This can be things like a boost to health or some kind of new effect or ability. There are also equipment cards in here. What happens is if you loot a chest, you, in this case you randomly get 1. In other games you actually get up to 3. And hope that you get the loot tokens. But there are also like traps and stuff, so you might accidentally draw a mimic on the treasure chest instead. So the character level up cards, you can get like bonuses to defense, bonuses to health, new abilities. Your stats don't increase, but you do get more abilities once you load up on experience points. So that is what leveling up does for you. And then we have the item cards. These are set aside until a character actually gets them and draws them, and they are able to use these special items. The Flame Tongue is actually one of the more it's actually one of the important cards in this little thing here, and I will get into that. So let's set this thing up. And here we are, Goblins and Great Halls, the preview adventure, and here we have it all set up here. I admit I took a few liberties in getting this board set up. I added a bunch of my own terrain, which was made out of Mega Bloks Dragons pieces, and that includes the throne in the center here. And it's a throne on the paper itself, so it's not like I've messed with the actual arrangement at all. So this is the basic setup here, where each team, and you can tell which team they are because they actually have the matching icon on the back of their cards, set up at opposite ends of the board, and the goblins are hiding behind the low wall next to one of the treasure chests. And I will go over a turn in a bit, but we still have some more setup to do, because we need to set up the treasure tokens. Now, the ways to earn victory points are by defeating goblins, and when a goblin is defeated, it respawns at either end of the map. But the real moneymaker is the Flame Tongue. Now, the Flame Tongue is an item that it's in the random loot chest. It might be in one of those treasure chests, and you loot a treasure chest as an action. There are 4 treasure chests on the map down there, but the Flame Tongue is worth 3 victory points by the end of the game. And if you attack a goblin with the Flame Tongue, it is defeated automatically. Now, in order to actually do this, it gets mixed in with all of the other treasures, and what you're supposed to do is when you loot a treasure chest, you remove that treasure chest from the board, and you're supposed to draw one randomly. In this case, we're going to do it with a bag, and I have this lovely Crown Royal bag. It's some of the best dice bags they make, but if you take a closer look at it, it's actually made of jersey material, so it's like a football jersey Crown Royal bag. So it is my my dice and token bag of choice, and it's generally better to use bags in this case rather than like cups or boxes, because to reach into a bag you have to stuff in your whole hand, and it's hard to cheat at and peek at what you get inside. Like here I got a potion instead of the Flame Tongue. So the items also all have corresponding cards. They're set here. You don't shuffle them. Once you draw the item, you take its card and you put it on one of your characters for them to equip it as an item. Now, the Flame Tongue in this campaign actually has a special rule that if the character carrying it takes damage, they drop it at their feet, and you can pick up loot as a free action. So they might drop it, so you can steal the Flame Tongue from each other. So yes, absolutely, you can attack the members of other players. In fact, a way to earn 2 victory points is to defeat the enemy characters, and that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do, especially since you only have 6 rounds. 6, huh? I know how to count to that. However, speaking of dice, the one thing that this set neglected to include with it was a set of 20-sided die. And the thing is, the box that it was sent in has like a pocket underneath where the initiative cards go, which I assume was meant to be a place where they would keep the 20-sided die, although it might as well be a reservoir to throw the tokens once they're all punched out. But no, it did not have any 20-sided die in it at all. Although, come on, what kind of self-respecting Dungeons & Dragons player does not have any 20-sided die on them? I mean, I could bust out my own. Like, I could use Babitos, or I could use Big Babitos, or, you know what? I think our best odds are going to be a comeback and cameo appearance of the dice I used in my How to Play Dungeons & Dragons at the Dollar Store video. I can even roll them in this lovely wooden dice tower, which is custom built from Troll Trader Games. It's one you make yourself. It's in the same vein of the buildings like the wrecked one I used for my Kill Team video, but this will allow us to not only roll fair and square, but the little reservoir also makes it a whole lot easier to film. So a battle round begins with the character who has the initiative of 1, which in this case is going to be Rock. Now, Rock is a sorcerer, which means he has a lot of ranged abilities that he can throw out to hit enemies with. But right now, unfortunately, he does not have line of sight to his target. There is a solid obstruction in the way. The way they say it works is I have to be able to draw a line from one of the corners here to 3 of the corners on my opponent in order to have line of sight. And right now, I can not even really line up one. So Rock is going to have to lead with his move action. Now, movement is actually done, it can only be done with sort of rook movement. That is vertical or horizontal. And Rock, he can go 1, 2, 3, 4... Is that right? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4... because he's aware that the goblin can move 3 on his turn, and it would not be able to get into melee range with him if he has to stop here. So what he can then do is check range. Now the range attack on his firebolt is a range of 2 to 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the goblin is within range of his attack. Now, rolls in this game are made with advantage, which means you actually roll a pair of 20-sided die and go with the higher one. Now, the Goblin Guard's armor class is 15, which means that Rock has to get a 15 on the dice in order to actually score a hit and inflict damage. The fact that he gets to roll 2 is a benefit, but he also gets to add 5 to the number that he rolls on the dice. So technically, a 10 or higher is enough to hit the Goblin Guard. Alright, with a 19 on the dice, that is going to be enough to land the hit. So, unlike in most games, there is actually no damage roll. Instead, the Goblin Guard automatically takes the 2 damage. And with that, Rock Pyratrix's turn ends. Next, the player who has the Initiative 2 card reveals their initiative. In this case, it's Grabbleshanks. Now, Grabbleshanks is also a character who can hit at range, but he is going to do something a little different. So, Grabbleshanks is going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, and now Grabbleshanks is going to take a shot at the Goblin Guard. Now, a thing about actually checking range, while movement must be done square to square, range can actually be checked diagonally. For example, Grabbleshanks has a range of 5, he can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to make that check, and hits the Goblin. With a 13 on the die plus 5 to hit, Grabbleshanks hits his target, and the Goblin takes 2 damage. Next, Grabbleshanks is going to use his bonus action to loot this treasure chest that's behind him. He is going to shake it up here. We draw 1 token from the bag, and it is not the Flame Tongue. Instead, he has drawn the Armor of Elvenkind. The Armor of Elvenkind has the effect that enemies cannot take reactions after your moves. Now, some characters have an effect where they can take a reaction attack, meaning that if you move up to a player and smack them in the face, if you try to then move away, they can take a free swing at you when you try to back off. This basically prevents that from happening. Not a bad thing for my rogue to have, since he has some pretty low health. So I'm actually going to equip the armor on to Grabbleshanks, and that makes up Grabbleshanks' turn. Up next is Initiative 3, which is Scrabbleshanks' partner, Lightning Dancer. Now, Lightning Dancer is a melee character who actually has no ranged attacks whatsoever, so he is going to move 1, 2, 3, 4, and he is going to perform a melee attack against this goblin. Oh, baby, it's a critical hit! He got a natural 20 on his attack. Not only does this mean that the attack automatically hits, he could have had an armor class of 1,000 for all it mattered, and it would have managed to hit anyway, but it means he gets to do a bonus effect as recorded on his character card. In his case, he gets to do an additional point of damage and push the enemy back, though that doesn't matter at this point because the goblin has been defeated by having all of its life points depleted, and the winning player gets to take a victory point, although they didn't have a victory counter for those either. That'll do. Also, it's a good thing he rolled that natural 20, or else that natural 1 would have bitten him and bitten him hard. Ooh, that sounds ominous. He then loots the treasure as a bonus action. And there it is, the Flame Tongue. So, he has managed to get himself the quest item. If he still has this thing on him by the time the game is over, it is worth an additional 3 victory points. It adds +2 damage to the critical, and it's a +6 to hit, with an additional damage on it, 3 fire damage, although it automatically defeats any goblins that it hits. A very good item for him to get. At Initiative 4, our final character, Bedlam, is not going to abide that. He is going to run 1, 2, 3, 4 in the direction of his foe. And he can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and he is going to try to make a shot at Lightning Dancer. He is able to draw lines from here to here to here, so he has line of sight. This is an important roll for Bedlam. If he can hit Lightning Dancer, he can force him to drop the Flame Tongue and then attempt to retrieve it on his next turn. Oh, pooh, a natural 1. Unfortunate, because even though that 15 would have been enough to hit Lightning Dancer with his base armor class of 16, and Bedlam's +5, the presence of the natural 1 means that the attack automatically misses, even though, like I said before, rolls are technically at advantage. A 1 is a miss, unless you also roll a 20. So, bit of bad luck for Bedlam there. And to make matters worse, it's now the enemy phase. Unfortunately, the enemies don't have to roll any dice, they simply attack. Now, what happens next on the enemy stage is the enemy moves towards its closest target, and in the case of any kind of tie, it goes to the active character. So, the goblin is going to advance 1, 2, 3. And then he is going to automatically attack the closest target to him, which, again, is a tie between Rock and Bedlam. However, since Bedlam was the character who most recently activated, Bedlam is going to be the target, which means that Bedlam is going to be taking 1 damage automatically. Bedlam's dial rotates down, although he is not yet in a state where his stats will change. In order to do that, he has to have taken a total of 5. But this gives Bedlam a chance to use his reaction. When he takes damage, you deal an equal amount of damage to the attacker, and since there's only 6 turns to use it, he might as well go for it anyway. So, he turns his cooldown dial to the 5 instructed on the card, and deals damage to the goblin equal to the amount he took, which, in this case, is 1. And then comes the cleanup round. Any used abilities tick down 1 cooldown point, and the active player gets to spawn a new goblin into play on one of the fringes of the board that they did not use before. In this case, Bedlam's player gets to choose, and they will spawn it close to the enemy. Perhaps a distraction, a trick, an attempt at reinforcements, who knows? The initiative cards are brought back, Lightning Dancer's player gets the 1, and then randomly shuffles the remaining for Bedlam's player to pick 2 from. The round advances to 2, and play resumes with the character that has an initiative of 1. And there you have it, the start of a battle for the ages. So, what could happen? Bedlam's player is currently behind, but the 2 characters are grouped more closely together, meaning that they could easily gang up on whoever they please. Will they manage to retrieve the Flame Tongue from Lightning Dancer, or will Lightning Dancer manage to hold on to it for the entire match? The problem is, if he runs away with it, he leaves poor Grabbleshanks all alone, and he is no match for Bedlam and Rock when they're combined their forces. And there you have it. Like I said, this is a pretty small, pretty straightforward campaign here. A very, very quick little encounter with some very basic mechanics and not a lot of characters. This isn't necessarily an example of how a full game goes. Like I said at PAX Unplugged, I got to play a demo where each team was actually 5 characters, and not only were there literally twice as many minions, there were 4 kobolds in the bunch. There was also their boss, which was an Etin, and the Etin actually had his own dial card, which determined his abilities. He did have to roll a dice to attack, but that determined whether he did 1 damage or 3 damage to whoever he targeted. And like I said, 3 damage is serious business, especially when a lot of these characters have a maximum health of like 9 or 10. That can actually be a lot of hurt in that one place. It also had a victory tracker, which might have been nice to have in this setup, although I guess it's not that complicated. The campaign with the Etin also had victory point locations, points to capture. If you've played like Warhammer 40k, you are familiar with capture points, and you capture a point by having a character on that point while your opponent has no characters on the point. Otherwise, the point is contested and neither player earns points from it. It's a mechanic you see in a lot of tactics games. A lot of tactics skirmish games, they can't really get away with just having a straight up fight between 2 units. There has to be some kind of twist in the whole thing in order to make it more interesting. And in the case of the Etin, it was having characters standing on magic sigils. And in the game I played, we had a point where I basically had it captured the whole game, and a point that after I had it captured for 1 turn, my opponent made sure to put somebody on it to contest it. However, those capture points made a massive difference, because you gain points for dealing damage to the Etin, and both of us did about the same amount of damage to the Etin and took out the same number of kobold minions, but because I was working really hard to capture those points, I had twice as many points by the end of the game as my opponent. You gotta catch those points, you gotta get those alternatives. I also realized I didn't take the opportunity to use any of these markers on here. These can be played on a character and trigger some kind of effect. If this guy had been close enough, he absolutely would have cursed Lightning Dancer. And the Etin mat was also basic. It was this same board, but this is like the center of that board. Like they cut it out. Like there was a whole lot more surface area to the board. The actual box itself has a 2-sided board, which is considerably larger. There's a lot more to do on it. It can support more characters. There are 10 initiative cards to my understanding, so you can have 5 characters from your team of 6 out in a lot of these encounters. This is one that's meant to be played with just 2 characters, and like I said, this is just like the center cutout of one of the sides of the board. The actual base game itself has 2 teams. You get the full roster for the teams these guys are on. They get some more companions there. I'm not sure you're allowed to mix and match them. In fact, I think you can't. But the actual set itself is $140, and that is a pretty difficult sell considering it only contains 21 minis. I mean, even Games Workshop is looking at it and being like, bruh. Now, the important thing is you have to, when you do something like that, you need to make sure that this thing is a worthwhile investment. And honestly, at this point, I think the ball is in WizKids' court, because the $140 contains a full campaign. I'm not sure how many missions are in that campaign. I'm hoping it's like at least 10. But the only other product they're showing off to support it are more teams to play as. And I'm sorry, WizKids, if you really want to sell me on this $140 price tag, you're going to have to show me that you are making more scenarios. I want more things to do with these characters, and those are the things that I honestly look the most forward to, are the new scenarios, especially since there seem to be non-mixable teams, although there seems to be a box of mercenaries you can buy, and those can go into any team and they're a bit cheaper. But no, I want to see more scenarios, more stuff to do. Give me the ice caves, give me mines full of gold and gems, give me like parts of like the Underdark, like a ghost town or a haunted castle. I want to have more of those kinds of things. I'm not sure how much content they could wring out of a single 2-sided map, but like I said, for me, it's going to require it's going to require more missions, and this is a mission that is actually not playable in the base set because this mission includes goblins in it, and there are no goblins in the box. There are technically only 9 enemy minions, and all of them, the only like mini super small minions are kobolds. You could use kobolds in place of this for the mission, but there are only kobolds in there, which means this, in its current state, to my understanding, is a unique experience. But I'm gonna do you guys a solid. I actually reached out to WizKids before filming this video and said, hey, is it okay if I like scan the campaign page for this and show my fans to it? And they were like, actually, we have an errated version of the rulebook that you can give them instead. Just the full thing, the campaign and everything. Now, it does not include the Goblin Guard card, nor does it include the weapons and special items, I think. Those I will scan in and those I will provide for you. But there is a link in the description leading to the map if you want to add an additional adventure to your experience. They also gave me a coupon code Onslaught Kohdok. If you want to buy any of the Onslaught sets, you can get $15 off of that. I'm not sure if that applies to only the base set or if you could use that to buy the mercenary pack as well, but come on, WizKids, give me some more to work with. One thing I think is kind of clumsy is, again, these character cards. Now, I do like the artwork here. It's nice and abstract, but nowhere on the card does it have, like, a picture of the actual miniature that is supposed to go with that character. If you look at HeroClix again, you can see I have my Superman mini here. He actually comes with a corresponding card, and you can tell that this is the Superman who goes with this card because we have a picture of the miniature on there. On future dials, I would like to be able to have somewhere, whether it's on here or whether it's on here, like a photograph of the mini that this character is supposed to go with. I mean, the name of the character is on the bottom here of the on the bottom of the base, this already clear base with just a tiny bit of white text on an already clear base. I would like it if maybe we got something on the card that acknowledged that relationship as well. But otherwise, I think this is a cool idea. Like I said, it's basically competitive Dungeons and Dragons where 2 teams have showed up at the same dungeon and they're like, hey, we got here first, we deserve all the glory and treasure and golden experience points, you can't have it. And they just kind of have it out while the dungeon mission is going on. And having the hot potato, the literal hot potato of the flame tongue to add a complicated angle to this, I think is really going to work. Like, it's clear that Bedlam and Rock are at a disadvantage at this point, but if they can gang up and deal with Lightning Dancer, or if they're able to keep Lightning Dancer scared enough that they can take out his little friend there, then they can actually apply some pretty oppressive pressure. It's not over yet. It's only round 2, and there are 6 rounds in this campaign, so a lot of things they can do. So, yeah, that is a look at the Dungeons & Dragons Onslaught set. I'd say, I mean, they gave me a coupon. They didn't say it had an expiration or anything. Me, personally, I'm going to sleep on this until we get an expansion with more missions, and we'll see how much those are priced at. We'll see if they do anything with, like, organized play. Like, there's organized play for HeroClix, so we'll see if they do any kind of organized play for this. So, yeah, that is Dungeons & Dragons Onslaught by WizKids. They did provide me this kit to make a video, and for the most part, I think it's fun. There's a lot of interesting tactics and depth. It just needs a bit more polish and a bit more content. So, yep, there we go. That's Dungeons & Dragons Onslaught, and until next time, this is Kohdok signing off. Hey, thanks again for watching, and of course, where else would this video be without the help of our fair patrons over at Patreon, particularly Cleeklo, Diamond Dread, and Team Mayorga for buying in at the $10 level or higher. Join the Patreon for as little as $1 per month to get Discord access and more. Until next time, this is Kohdok signing off.